Inside the United States right now, they estimate there's 10,000 spies. Undercover people living here stealing secrets.
Wow.
Every country specializes in a different type of intelligence, but we specialize in stealing secrets. Mossad specializes in violence, liberating people who are kidnapped and killing people who deserve to die. China specializes in the theft of intellectual property, but they're not the best. You know who the best is?
Nigeria?
No.
Oh.
The number one threat to the United States, it's France. I've essentially been a government asset since I was 16 years old, handling nuclear weapons.
When you say government asset,
They put your last name in capital letters. According to American law, when your last name appears in capital letters, you are actually no longer an individual. You are actually a piece of property that belongs to federal government.
wow. You don't think Putin has cancer?
Correct. Vladimir Putin that I've been watching for the last year and a half. He may have cancer, but if he does, he's under some kind of very effective treatment. He's still waging a war against Ukraine. He hasn't changed much from the guy the day before he invaded Ukraine.
What's the motivation behind the war?
In media, people aren't talking about the real motivation. They're calling it an attack on democracy. In reality, that's not the case at all. But the question of whether or not a foreign intelligence service controlled the president, the first time that ever came to light was with Trump. Because he's the client, he dictates what you can and can't do to him. So when the New York police wanted to go in and arrest President Trump and take him to the court, they had to coordinate with the Secret Service.
This is a mess.
This is why the world looks at us and laughs at us right now. Primary and alternate audio, man. It's the way to do it.
Yes.
Losing an episode is the fucking...
Man, I'm telling you, it is heartbreak hotel. It is heartbreak hotel. Then, like, I'll tell you a story. Lil Baby, I don't know. Do you know who Lil Baby is?
No.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you're gonna find it, like, you're gonna be
Amazed.
how little I know about anything pop culture.
So this is why it's so important for these conversations. It's because you know so much. I know you know so much because I've heard you speak, and I'm like, fuck, I didn't think
so
about
little
that.
at the same time.
Right,
man.
but then when you get dense into that culture or our culture, it's like, nah, I don't know, Lil Baby. Picture that. Like a dude literally has 100 plaques. You know Drake, I know.
Yeah.
Drake is the biggest shit in the world. So okay, cool.
But that's
about where it stops.
and that's how bad it is.
Yeah. What about actors? Give me some actors you know.
Oh, dude, every actor I give you is gonna be ancient like me, man.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like your Morgan Freemans and your fucking
Nobody knew.
Denzel Washington.
Kevin Hart.
I know Kevin Hart.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's give some names. Who else? The Rock, of course.
Yeah.
See, these dudes transcend culture.
That's true.
They're
They're
on
above
each,
it.
Exactly. How many people are above culture?
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating is when we talk about being above culture, I think what we're really saying is pioneering a new culture, right? Because The Rock is in this place where he's pioneering both people of color and
Yes.
Pacific Asian
Yes.
Americans,
Yes.
right?
He's putting a new twist on it. Again, he's identifying something different. The Rock, his journey's been crazy. He comes from, and we're already rolling. It's Up There podcast. You know where you're at. I don't like to do the long intro.
Yeah.
You know, another episode. Today we have someone that I'm so hyped to speak to. I get his last name wrong 100% of the time.
So do I.
Andrew Bustamante. How are you, brother?
I'm happy to be here, man. This is an awesome opportunity for me
I appreciate
to have a conversation like this. And just in the preamble, man, what we've been talking about just since I've gotten here,
Right.
I feel bad the cameras haven't already been on.
Right, me too, man. I actually, at some point, we want to start catching those moments because those be the moments. Those soon as you initially, because you're trying to fight through what's going on, what's your understanding, where are we, right? And it's so interesting. First of all, give them your background a little bit.
So I'm a former CIA intelligence officer. I spent 7 years undercover with CIA working around the world. And prior to that, I was a U.S. military officer with the Air Force, handling nuclear weapons. I had a top secret SCI, stands for Special Compartmented Information Clearance. I've essentially been a cultivated government asset since I was 16 years old.
And so for the audience, when you say government asset, that means you've been in cahoots with the government.
Yeah, so what a lot of people don't realize is that when you join the military or when you join any kind of federal agency, they put your last name in capital letters. And according to American law, when your last name appears in capital letters, you are actually no longer an individual. You are actually a piece of property that belongs to the federal government. So my name was in capital letters until 2014 when I put in my separation paperwork to leave CIA.
So what do they show that? I mean, is that on your ID and things like that? Capital letters. Who puts it in capital letters, and where is that? Like, if I wanted to see your name to identify the difference.
So the specific location is on the contract that you sign with the federal government in your terms and your agreements of service. So when you sign your commitment of service with the military, you sign your commitment of service with FBI, NSA, whatever it might be. When you sign that commitment, you'll see that at the very top of the contract, your name appears in all caps.
Wow.
Yeah. And then within the terms of that contract, it says that you are essentially abandoning your rights, your individual rights, and replacing them with the needs of the service of whatever organization you're working with.
What will make you buy into that?
For me, I grew up poor, man. I grew up poor in a rural part of Pennsylvania. I was a brown kid in a white rural town, and opportunity just didn't exist.
Right.
I mean, in my high school, and I was lucky enough to go to high school, which not everybody gets to do, right?
Exactly.
But in my high school, like my sophomore year of high school, our guidance counselor called us in and talked to us all about our future after high school, and there were really only two options. You either go work in one of the businesses in the same town where we live, or you go to a local community college and you get an associate's degree, and then you come back and you work for one of the companies that's in our little hometown. That was it.
Right.
And I remember when he told us that my sophomore year, I just accepted it. Because what do you do when you're 15 years old? You just accept what authorities tell you, right? And I went to my mom. My mom raised me. My father died when I was very young from a violent crime. And I talked to my mom, and I was like, "Yeah, I guess I'll get a job because I'm not really going to go to community college. I probably don't have the grades."
Right.
And she was like, "There's more than just two options." And I was like, "No. The guidance counselor said there's only two options."
Exactly.
And my mom went ape shit, man. And she dragged my ass in, had to sit down with the guidance counselor, ripped him up with me sitting in the room, and it was that day that I learned that there really is nobody who has authority over us. They have the authority we give them, and that's all they have.
What do you think? Well, I mean, when you say that, tell me more about that, because I think my audience and us would like to learn a little bit more about your understanding of authority. Seeing that you've been, integrated with the CIA, it's like, what does power look like to you?
Man, that's such a big question. So CIA teaches us very early on that power is tied intrinsically to something called perception, right? And perception is what we all have, how you view the world. So there's the literal version of perception, meaning you sitting where you're sitting, your point of view. You're looking at me, so you see the wall behind me, you see the wall over in that direction, you see the light coming in from that window, you see a little bit of the roof, you see a little bit of the floor. That's your point of view. Well, my point of view is totally different from your point of view. I see the wall behind you. I see a different patch of roof.
Exactly.
I see different lighting.
Exactly.
Right? So that's the very literal form of perception. But then there's also the perception of what your point of view has done to program the way you view the world. So I grew up in a white rural neighborhood. You did not.
Right.
So I have been shaped by a childhood in a white rural neighborhood. I have not been shaped the way that you were shaped by your neighborhood.
Right.
Now compound that over time. I'm 43 years old, so compound my point of view over 43 years of my experience. And what you're doing is you're creating an algorithm that defines how I view
the world.
Bingo.
Right.
You have done the same thing.
Exactly.
And every single person we meet during the day, and day in, day out, year after year, they've all had that different programming. If you think about the fact that all of our brains are like multiple millions of quantum computers, you can see how different we all think. But the core computer is the same.
Dope.
The pink matter between your ears is the same as the pink matter between my ears. Biologically.
Perspective. Yeah, it's all perspective that shapes it.
So it's all programming.
Yes.
So what CIA taught us, and what makes the CIA such a powerful organization, is that it teaches you that what's important is not the coding, because you can change the coding. What's important is understanding the computer itself.
Right. And then also understanding that you can change the coding. Is there such thing from the CIA perspective as being like hardwired? Like we some people are just so far gone that you can't interject or change the way that they view things.
Absolutely. And what we're talking about there is this concept called neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the idea of the human brain is more like a plastic explosive than it is like a plastic mold. You can constantly change the way you think. If you listen to something new, if you start listening to new music, if you read a new book, if you watch a new TV show, you're going to introduce new information into your brain, which means your brain is going to adapt to that new information. Some of that information you disagree with. And you've had that experience, no doubt, where somebody has said something and you just straight up disagree with it. And your face kind of shrinks.
Right.
And you feel your forehead wrinkle and you can feel the friction of the information. That's called cognitive dissonance. It's the feeling you have when the information that you know is different from the information that you're hearing, and it causes friction, right? That's a growth process for the brain. Now, some people are so far gone, their brain has become so much more like a plastic mold that they willfully reject the new information. And we see that especially in our culture now with far left, far
That's
right.
That's exactly where I was going, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And these people, you can tell them anything you want to tell them. You can tell them the truth. You can show it to them in writing. You can let them watch a video and they will still deny it.
Yes.
Those are folks that are willfully rejecting information. Their neuroplasticity has become artificially, they're holding it back. They're blocking their own brain. It's become low.
I think there's a point, though, in which at least people that I've dealt with is where they can act like, and I want to make sure we are recording. It says record, right? Okay. Well, it's a point where they'll say they're not getting the information, but they're really getting the information, right? Like you just laid it out so clear that they cannot deny that, right? But they'll still, for the sake of to save face and all of that. I mean, how do you know when you're not dealing with that from a CIA perspective? When someone's like, "Nah, we'll never buy down, or we'll never," and you're like, "No, they're getting weaker."
Yeah.
You know it.
Yeah. So now we get into a space where you're reading human behavior, right? Now, human beings, because our computer is the same, right? Because that quantum computer, that pink matter between our ears, is the same for everybody. You already know what you can expect from the computer itself. So it's just a matter of understanding the coding on top of the computer to be able to understand human behavior. So if you're talking to, a Nigerian and you're talking to a Malaysian, two completely different countries, two completely different backgrounds, two completely different sets of coding on top of a core computer, that's the same. You just have to understand what is the coding that is Nigerian, what is the coding that is Malaysian, and then you can hack your way through whatever response. You can understand their behaviors much better. So yeah, it's about understanding how the person is behaving. So for example, if you're sitting across from your kid, or if you're sitting across from someone who's your peer, just like you were saying, that they are seeing the information.
Yes.
It's undeniable.
Yes.
And you know that it's starting to sink in.
Right.
But what happens is when you hit that cognitive dissonance, people have a different reaction. Some people react to cognitive dissonance by sitting back and listening more, right? You're that kind of person.
Right.
You hear something that's new to you,
Yes.
and you're like, tell me more.
Dive into it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't agree with it yet.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Right.
Make me a believer.
Right.
But then you've got other people who, as soon as they hear that new information, it creates
no way it's true. Now, okay, so and I'm kind of getting into it, rushing into it, but I do want to section things off. But for the sake of this, I think it makes sense. Somebody like Putin, when you're losing a war, right? And not saying he's losing, but I can imagine in war, people take these poker faces to another level. So I don't think you can only go off human behavior in that scenario, right? Do you have to, what other things do you look for when you deal with someone that has so much at stake and so much lying on their understanding and the beliefs that they've been having for so long? So to change that belief means to lose everything, right? How do you know that, damn, I'm dealing with someone that is circumstantial why they are not receiving the information, or not that they're not receiving the information, that they're not accepting the information?
So now what you're talking about is really the heart and soul of intelligence, especially when you start talking about like an authoritarian leader like Vladimir Putin.
Right.
You can't make a high probability prediction using just one form of information. So if we're watching Putin on TV and that's our only form of information, then we're not getting a high probability accuracy. That's why propaganda is so dangerous.
Exactly.
Because propaganda intentionally serves the masses only one form of information. How often do you see President Biden in any other format other than on TV?
Exactly.
It's because it's controlled.
Yes.
Right? How often do you see celebrities in any other format other than when they are prepped and ready for the set, the stage, the interview?
Yes.
You don't.
Especially when you deal with the president, you know for a fact, because we're in a world where a lot of people are more visible on social media, and you don't see anything outside of that suit at a podium,
Yep.
getting off an air
Yep.
jet or whatever. Like, that's deep.
And think about President Trump. People think President Trump was so different. He
Same
was
thing.
no different.
Yes, same
Exactly.
thing.
Every tweet was cultivated. Every message was cultivated. Were they cultivated by a team of social media experts? Probably not. Some of those tweets were just Trump firing off. But that dude lives a life where he understands to set a narrative,
Yes,
and be very consistent with that narrative.
no matter what. He's also applies to what we're saying when it's like, yo, I can't come out now and say the election was good. I have too much to lose to accept the information, even from the feds, the government, the states, whoever says it. I'm still gonna say, no matter what, yo, they ran off with the election.
Yeah, and it's wild because, as adults, we look at this and we call it unjust and we call it unfair and we call it, corrupt. For anybody who ever played high school sports, I don't know if you played high school sports.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a basketball, football game, baseball game, whatever sport you played? Did you ever have a halftime where you were losing?
Yes.
And the coach pulls you in, and what does the coach say? We're going to turn this around, guys.
Get it together. Yes.
Right? You've got so much more in you.
Yes.
You're going to turn this around. Dig deep,
Yes.
right? You know what they really should be saying if they're telling the truth? You guys just sucked ass.
Yes.
You got beat down.
Giving it to you straight up.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's not what motivates people. That's not what inspires change. That's not what makes people take action. What makes people take action is oftentimes a fictional narrative. You have so much more in you. Like, I had many a games where we were losing, and at halftime we were losing, and at the end of the game we still lost.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any more in me. Because the other
Right.
team was just superior or because whatever else, right? But the coach's job is to create inspiration, even if it's fictional. And that's the truth behind human nature.
Right.
We want to believe, even if what we believe in isn't real.
That's deep.
And because of that, you see both politicians and Hollywood and entertainment, everybody's shaping us with inspirational fiction. But then for some people who chase that inspirational fiction, they end up making it a reality. And then those become the few people that are the role models, the examples, the examples of success that the rest of us aspire to be.
Right. And speaking of propaganda, right? I'm so glad you said that, because you come from intelligence, and we're going to get a little bit into hip hop culture. I just did an interview with a guy who did a documentary on a rapper by the name of King Von. This rapper is deceased, R.P. King Von. He was someone who was involved in what they would like to say the life of crime, supposed to be a lot of crime. So you have a guy from the UK, not from this. King Von's from Chicago, and if you need anything answered, just ask me. Okay, what about ask me, because I know people that are watching. I need this to connect. So King Von was a rapper out of Chicago with a very checkered past, right? He's been arrested for murders, acquitted. Certain things have happened. He's been acquitted. Then got a guy that I know named Trap Lord Ross out of the UK. I just interviewed him, and we had a heated debate about me saying, yo, what are you thinking? The reason I say this is Trap Lord Ross dropped a documentary and said King Von, rap's first serial killer. So he classified him a serial killer. And I said, man, where did he get that? The dude's never been convicted. The dude's never, like, I don't know, somebody from the UK, where did he get that from? So I talked to him. He said, well, the dude rapped about it. The dude always talked about bodies. The dude always, certain things he said. And I was like, yo, but you called him a serial killer. And I believe that he made that decision based on nothing but tweets and social media. And you just spoke to why it is ill-advised to make decisions off one piece of information. I just wanted to lay that out because I do want my audience to understand that. I want to also go back to this because we grew up so different. I know you said that you didn't have any choices. What kind of kid were you? Were you interested in the kind of thing that you're doing now as a kid?
I think it's a great question. So I was a good kid. I grew up, I'm Mexican. I'm ambiguously brown.
Right.
And I totally own that, right? But I am 3/4 Mexican and 1/4 Navajo Indian. That's where this freaking weird Mayan, like, Indian look comes from. But so I grew up in a household where my father, who was Indian, was killed in a violent crime, and my mother raised me. My grandmother raised me till I was 5. So I was very much one of those boys that lived in a strong matriarchal home, right? Mexican, Catholic, strict home. And those my formative years, 1 through 5, that's how I was shaped. So when my mom remarried, and she remarried a white guy who took us to Pennsylvania and
Right.
built his career in Pennsylvania, I always was like at the right-hand side of my mom. That was my protector. That was my lioness. That was my, she was the one that directed me.
Right.
So to let mom down, to go contrary to mom's expectations, it was not going to happen.
It's heavy.
And
Yeah.
it was scary.
Yes.
Right? Because mom didn't come and have a nice, encouraging conversation with you like the coach did.
Right.
Mom came at you hard and fast, and your father was killed.
Yeah.
I can't let that happen to you. My one job is to keep you alive and make sure you make better decisions than he did. That's heavy shit, right?
And I was thinking, like, moms are usually coming based on, like you said, their experiences, their algorithm. Yo, where I've got to this place, I'm trying to give you a head start, and this is my version of your head start.
Yep.
Right? And as the world changes, even someone like me, to get out of poverty, I had to go contrary to mom. And that was rough. Because mom don't see this. Mom didn't see this being what this is. There's no way. Mom said go get a job.
Yeah.
Go work 20, 30 years, right? But continue.
So I followed mom's guidance, right? That's the kind of kid I was. Do what mom says, because I didn't really let any other information in. So I went and I studied in high school. And when I was in high school, I turned my grades around really fast and really young because I saw that I could. My mom showed me that authority did not belong with the school. Right? That the teachers, the principals, the guidance counselors were just people, flawed. They had their own coding. They were weaker than my mom, and I was the offspring of my mom.
Exactly.
So I was probably stronger than these fuckers in school too,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So once that kind of changed my mindset, everything was about make mom proud, make mom proud, make mom proud. So that's why I went to college, and that's why I chose my college. I went to the Air Force Academy. I became an officer in the military. I became a pilot. I became a nuclear missile officer.
See, you was always into.
I was straight-laced, man.
Yes.
Straight-laced until 2007 when I was at CIA. And then CIA put me through their training school. And when I went through their training school, they absolutely crushed the worldview that I had and gave me a truly transparent view on the world. And that was when I realized all of mom's flaws. And that's when I started making decisions that just didn't cooperate with mom.
Right.
So for my mom, how challenging was that? She had this little boy who listened to her until she was like 50 years old. And then I was like, Mom, I'm going to go do my own thing now.
So it's rough on them. It's rough.
So now I'm an entrepreneur. Now I'm an internet, internet voice.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm a sensation.
Yeah, you are. We're giving you that. Listen, it's so important that your experience, man, has caused for you to be able to explain things in a very unique way. Like you said, you have now what's called, I would consider, a worldview, which draws people like me in, people like all of the countless amazing big platforms you've been on. Like, we're so interested in, what do you think about this? Right? Because they did drag you through that school of like, no, we're going to do you like this. Now, help me understand some of the things they crushed. What was something that was disappointing or something that they crushed for you? Because that's so heavy.
Yeah, dude. So I'm going to start you off with the heaviest one, right? There is a connection, an empirical scientific connection between high-performing people, high-achieving people, professional athletes, professional entertainers, anybody who's made it right? The grit and the courage and the hard work and the discipline and the practice that it takes for us to get there, there's a strong connection between that and childhood trauma.
Wow.
Which means that if you have not been traumatized as a child, you may never taste success.
Wow.
And the success that people like you and I and other entertainers that you're friends with and some of the biggest names that we've all heard before, the reason that they have the success they have was because.
Isn't that crazy? And I believe that because I come from trauma. And you were just explaining trauma, right? It's like, yo, we come from things, man, that's so heavy.
And we grow up thinking, man, I know, because I've gone to bed at night as an adult wishing that never happened. But to wish that that never happened would be to also wish.
Take that ingredient out that makes the cake what the cake is.
Exactly right.
Wow, that is so crazy.
So they teach us at CIA, hey, you're all fucked up. And we like you that way. And you're better for it. So don't fight it. Don't criticize yourself for it. Don't judge yourself for it. Just own it and shape it.
Right. And that's the most important part. And I think that we, in my culture, forget to shape it. We learn how to deal with it, but dealing with it ain't enough.
Right.
You must learn how to shape it. Take what happened to you and make it a benefit for you. That's so crazy. Tell me, have you ever been busted out? So give me the different facets of the CIA in regards to, were you someone that put the mask on, what level were you on, and also explain the other levels even if you were not on them, because I just want to understand the branches.
Yeah, absolutely. So CIA is a big, complicated machine in a lot of ways, but it really boils down to a handful of different disciplines. There's technical officers, and those are all the people that do. They create the listening devices, and they hack into computers, and they do everything technical. And then you've got the analysts, and your analysts are individuals who take all different types of information, newspapers, radio clippings, special reports that come in from other intelligence services, whatever. But then they read, they synthesize the information, and they create a conclusion, right? Those are your analysts. And then you have your field officers. Field officers are the ones who live and work undercover. They're the ones that put on disguises, whether that disguise is fake skin or whether that disguise is a fat suit. They're the ones that go out in the field, and sometimes they're shooting at bad guys, and sometimes they're swimming underwater and sneaking up on a roadblock, and other times they're meeting in a fancy suit in a nice restaurant,
right,
pretending to be
right,
somebody they're not. I came from the field officer world.
Which is the world you just explained.
Right. So
wow.
I came from the world
We got a lot to talk about.
Disguise and human interaction and sneaking up and faking people out, right? But to get there, for that one discipline to work, you need the other disciplines. You need technical officers because they're the ones that give you the listening devices that you can plant on other people. You need analysts because analysts are the people who tell you who's worth talking to and who's not.
Teamwork.
It's not like it is in the movies where James Bond goes out there by himself. He can't. It's James Bond with like 50 people behind him.
Well, I think sometimes with those movies, they did make them kind of phone in to the big screen with people in there, it's faking like it's 1,000 screens, So I think they tried to give a little bit of team, but it was overly exaggerated that a one-man army in such a complex situation. Okay, field officer. Do you know of any stories of people being caught in the act of?
All the time.
This dude's an operative.
Yeah, that happens more often than you think. It almost happened to me, and I'm in the process right now of getting CIA approval to talk about my personal background.
Okay.
We sign a lifetime secrecy agreement, which means that for the rest of our life, we can't talk about certain things without getting their approval first.
Okay, cool.
And one of the things I'm trying to get permission from them to do is talk about my own operational history. I think a lot of people infer or assume some of my background based off of what I talk about and what I know about, and that's safe.
So you can't say none of that.
I can say I was in Asia.
Right.
I can say that I served undercover. I can say that I...
so it's context. It got to be context, and people just do with that what they may.
Yeah, for now.
Right.
But I know where I want to go because I am trying to build a brand,
right?
My company, Everyday Spy, and myself, my name,
right?
Or trying to represent a brand that represents truth,
Right.
transparency,
Right.
honesty.
Yes.
Right? And that goes completely contrary to everything that CIA values. They value secrecy. They value discretion, right? So it's a challenge because I'm trying to build something where my background has a policy, an official policy against transparency and honesty.
Right. And that's crazy. So how hard is it to build that? I mean, what's making you do that?
So it's a personal mission for me. And that personal mission became because the second big like aha moment for me happened when I left CIA. So the first aha moment was when I was at CIA and they explained to me, hey, childhood trauma made you who you are. You have to accept that and shape it. That was just absolutely inspiring. And then in 2014, when I left CIA, and I left CIA for reasons I'm sure we can talk about whenever, but when I left CIA, it was the first time that I stepped out from under the umbrella, and that changed my perspective.
Again.
And when I saw what CIA did to its own officers, I realized that CIA taught us how to manipulate people and how to make people do what we wanted them to do without even realizing it. And then when I stepped out, I realized that CIA was doing the same thing to us.
Right, making y'all do, yes, yeah, that makes sense because that's the business model.
That's the business model.
Yeah.
That's the hierarchy.
Yes.
But you don't even realize it. So somehow it was a really hard decision to get out of CIA because I felt like I'm letting my country down and I'm disappointing my peers. And I went through all this training and like I feel a moral obligation to continue serving. But when I left for family reasons. I wanted to take care of a family. I wanted to raise my children.
Yes.
I didn't want to be the absentee dad that my father never got the chance to be for me.
Yes.
Right? But stepping away, I realized, oh shit, all of my guilt, shame, all of those feelings that made me feel like I was abandoning CIA, that was all just part of the worldview that they had programmed into me to get me to say yes to dangerous missions, put my life at risk, and potentially leave my wife and my children without a dad.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, man. Wow, that is so deep. What are some of the tactics that they use to manipulate people or teach you like manipulation? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So the first and largest tool that we're given, the system that we're given to really hack into human brains and understand how to control the way someone else thinks is to understand their 4 core motivations. All human beings, all education levels, all races, all ethnicities, all ages have 4 core motivations. And the acronym that we use for that is called RICE, R-I-C-E, RICE. And the letters each have a meaning. And the R stands for rewards, the I stands for ideology, the C stands for coercion, and the E stands for ego. So all human beings are motivated by a mix of these 4 primary motivations. So if you want to control someone else's behavior, if you want to manipulate someone, or if you want to motivate someone. So your high school coach was doing this just as much as the abusive girlfriend or boyfriend that you have, right? They mix these 4 things together. They'll offer you rewards. Maybe we'll give you a bonus at the end of the year. I'll pay you a little extra. I'll pay you it all, right? Or you can win a prize if you give me your phone number, or if you sign your mom up and for this free cruise and just give us her address and her phone number and her whatever without her consent, right? Those are all types of manipulating people for reward. Ideology is a really strong one and a really obvious one. This is where you have people who become super ideological about their religion. They become ideological about family values. They become nationalistic, right? America first, hoorah, everybody else second kind of thing. It's where you see people become hardcore Broncos fans or hardcore Chargers fans. That's ideology, right? Then you've got the C. C is coercion. Coercion is all the stuff that is like shame, guilt, violence. When you threaten someone, that's coercion. Coercion is a tool that works, but it's actually the weakest and most dangerous tool to use. Because once you use it and you're caught using it, you can never use it again. It
ruins, and also it ruins, it almost transcends that category and ruins like your reputation and other things, because people will start to look at you now like, caught you lying.
Yes, I can't trust that guy.
Right.
Everything I give him, he uses against me.
Yes.
And then the last one is ego. E is ego. And ego is often the one that's the most mistaken. Ego does not mean that someone is egotistical. Egotistical means you think you're better than everybody else. That's not the same thing as ego. Ego is you trying to shape the way that other people see you. So if you want people to see you as sacrificial and giving, that's your ego.
Wow.
If you want people to see you as powerful and bold, that's your ego. If you want people to see you as studious and intelligent, that's your ego.
So say we have a rapper like that has a bunch of money, and people say, well, he doesn't wear jewelry, he always dresses down. Could that be his personality, or is that his ego that's trying to be like, I'm unfazed by the money? That money stuff means nothing to me. Like, which one is that?
So you could, by just looking at the person, you're giving yourself only one information stream. So
Bad decision.
So you make a low probability assessment, right?
Yes.
But as you spend time with that person, as you talk to that person, as you learn about that person, read a biography written about them by somebody else,
right,
you might learn that there's some ideological reason.
Right.
That maybe when they were growing up, their mom or dad taught them that showing off your money makes you weak or poor, poor of spirit or poor of soul, who knows what. Maybe they're super religious, you don't know.
Right.
Or it could be that they're just using good operational security and they want to walk down the street without the whole world thinking that they're wealthy.
Yes.
I've got one of the primary client sets that I serve are ultra high net worth, professional athletes, professional entertainers, business executives, and they hire me to come in and consult with them on anything from business to personal security to securing their family or their home or their property. And one of the first questions that they always have is, am I a target? And you can look at somebody right away and say, yes, you would be a target.
Yes.
Because the bad guys out there look at you and me differently than you and I look at each other. Like, we look at each other face to face.
Right.
I look at your eyes,
right,
I look at your face, and
right,
and then I notice, oh, you got a cool necklace.
Right.
And then I notice I like your watch.
Right.
Bad guys, they don't look at your face. They look at your wrist.
Yes.
And then once they see the wrist, they look up, what else does this guy have? And then finally they look at your face.
Yes.
And they decide whether or not you're the right mark for them.
Right. Man, this is so much. And I also want to talk about, go back a little bit, because you were speaking about the coercion. Coming up in the inner city, in the drug game, I always said to myself, these dudes, now that I'm old, I look back and say, well, damn, they were manipulating us as kids. Right? So the older guys in the neighborhood would take a stance. And this is, people still don't know this, that's operating in that world right now. So this is important for y'all, because I always preach getting out of whatever circumstances you were placed in. I understand being placed there, but I don't understand staying there. Yeah. But the older guys in the neighborhood, trick they would run. They would position themselves as big homie, which is over everybody in the neighborhood, maybe because they got access to things again, everybody's fighting for financial gain. It's financial hardship. They would say, yo, little homie, you don't even sell drugs. You don't know nothing about drugs. A lot of people, this is how they introduce to drugs, by someone older that has a lot of drugs that says, little homie, I'm looking out for you. I want to put something in your pocket. I want to get you up and rolling, and hand them some drugs to work for them. Now, I used to take that as a young man as, man, them boys showing me love. As I got old, I said, no, they need help getting that stuff off. So this is business for them. This is not love. This is them saying, yo, I can't have all this stuff sitting in one place. So I'm going to get young kids in the inner city and say, hey, little bro, I'm messing with you. I'm put something in your hand, and literally set people down that wrong path, man. And as you say, that manipulation, I connected to that, because I can see that clearly as day now. It ain't no love in that. That's not love. It's almost not even opportunity. It's out of their self-preservation of saying, hey, I've had friends that had a bunch of stuff laying somewhere. They get arrested and they got everything they got. So the goal is to put everything out on the streets with people you trust, just in case someone kicks in the door, the police or something, and it's barely nothing here.
Yeah. So the terminology that we use to describe what you just laid out is leverage and compromise. And that's what the big homies were doing to the little homies, right? They came in looking like, and giving the impression that they were helping, right? So, hey, little homie, let me help. Because help is one of those things that we don't, culturally and as human nature, we don't deny help. We'll take help.
Right.
Until we train Until we train ourselves to reject help, we'll take help, right? But then what they were actually doing is when they gave you the drugs, if you took those drugs, now what they're doing is they're compromising you. Because now you're actually in a position where you have accepted what they've given you, and it's a material good.
Right.
It's got value.
Yes.
So if that drug disappears, if you lose it, if you drop it, you're going to owe them something.
Mm-hmm.
If you sell it, you're going to owe them something, right? And you're going to be connected to them.
Exactly.
So they've compromised you, right? And the more that someone compromises you to them, the more leverage they have over you. So I think this is a fantastic example, because what does the banking system do to every human being? The exact same thing.
Yep.
That big homies do to little homies.
That's what I'm saying.
Hey, you need a house. You need a car. Let me help you. Let me give you a loan.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. And for us, it's like how many people has been affected by, and again, we're going to get into the war on drugs and all of that. I want to speak on some of that. But let me back up a little bit, because I'm going deep into it. But yeah, that manipulation that these guys were running, man, I think that it was far misunderstood in the inner city. That, you know, a lot of this led to gang formation and everything, because it's like, yo, he the one put me in the game. Like, he claiming blue, crip, or whatever. I got to claim that, right? And so what I'm trying to speak to, or the young homies, I need them to understand, is that there's a level of manipulation that's happening when you in that world, man. And that's, to me, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of the world that we live in right now has been formed around manipulation. That's the right word. Manipulation is when you get people to do what you want them to do because it benefits you, right? And this is important. Manipulation is when you get people to do what you want them to do because it benefits
100%.
you. It's just one side of a coin, though. The other side of the same coin is motivation. Motivation is when you get people to do what they want to do and it benefits them. Right? Same coin, two sides.
That is so right.
One side is manipulation, one side is motivation. The skills that you need to make the coin are the same skills.
That is so right. That is a light bulb for me. That is so correct, because it is the exact same formation.
Yeah. Every country has their own intelligence service, and intelligence services are broken down into two parts. There's an external intelligence service that collects intelligence from outside of the country, and then there's an internal intelligence service that collects intelligence from inside of the country. If you look at the United States, we have the same thing, two intelligence services. We have more than two, but the two primary are CIA. CIA collects all the external intelligence. We collect secrets from other countries, not American secrets, other country secrets.
I don't know
and,
now.
And FBI.
Okay, that's how it's okay.
FBI collects internal secrets, secrets about any kind of threat inside the United States. So you were getting to Edward Snowden, I'm pretty sure, in NSA, and they're a weird, different part that we have. The UK also has a third part like this, where they collect intelligence from signals.
Okay, and we'll get to Snowden, because that's going to be a good one. But let's do China.
So China has a very similar breakdown to the United States. They have an external service. That external service is called the Ministry of State Security, the MSS.
Wow.
And then they have their own internal service. They have their own military service. They have their own counterintelligence service. But the organization, the intelligence operatives of China that work against us are called the MSS.
Isn't it weird that we have all this intelligence stuff against each other and all this war by proxy stuff going on, but yet we do business? Like how weird is that?
It seems when you don't have that new worldview, it seems like that wouldn't make sense. It would seem like those things are in conflict. But once you kind of start to learn a larger worldview, you realize it makes sense, because what do we always try to teach anybody in business or anyone in school, right? You do what you're supposed to do, but you're also checked. So like you take a test or a quiz in high school and you answer the questions. The teacher doesn't just give you credit for the test because you took it. They then go back and check
the answers.
right? In business, we do a year's worth of business, and then what do we submit at the end of the year?
Taxes.
And they check to make sure that you're doing everything lawfully, right?
Right.
Intelligence services do the same thing. Why would we trust what China tells us? We don't. So we have an intelligence service that checks to make sure that they're telling us the truth and to steal the secrets they're not telling us.
Yeah, and see, that's what I'm saying. All of that just seems like a conflict. But does China's version, which is MSS, and CIA communicate at all? Have they ever communicated in history?
They do, actually, and intelligence services communicate over shared common threats. Now, one of the things that's tricky about China specifically is the United States, our number one concern from 2001 to 2021, basically, was terrorism. And we were fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we were on a global war against terrorism, right? The GWAT. That was our focus. China doesn't really care about terrorism, but they do care about the United States. So their MSS created a group to track terrorists, specifically so that they could keep in contact with us. So where enemies cooperate is over a shared third enemy.
Right. And see, I just don't, those relationships, I mean, again, I understand it though, because I also understand in the culture how we do business, or in business period, how we have to, I may have to buy something from over here that I really don't care for these individuals, but the price is better, the quality of it is great, and it keeps our bottom line low. So I have to do it, but it just feels wrong. It just feels funny. It feels like it's not safe. It feels,
What you're getting at there is another really important principle that they teach us, and this is this lesson is a lesson that causes the most issues when I tell people about it, right? And it's called moral and ethical flexibility. We're recruited because we're already carrying some moral flexibility. Right? So there are some people who would never cheat on a girlfriend, and then there are some people who would cheat on a girlfriend if the situation was right. And then there's other people who just
don't matter. Yeah. Right? Flat out cheat.
Yeah, so the CIA doesn't want the person who cheats all the time, and they don't want the person who cheats never. They want the person who cheats under the right circumstances, because that's a person who can be manipulated and shaped into a different worldview, right? So that ethical flexibility, that moral flexibility is a really important element when CIA goes to find its intelligence officers. Just like you're saying the same thing. It doesn't feel right, but the bottom line gets the benefit.
Exactly.
It's a better product. It's a superior quality, so I'm going to do it even though it doesn't feel right.
Makes sense. I've never heard CIA pick anybody from the ghetto.
They actually pick a lot of people from some
I don't
really
have
diverse
one friend.
worlds.
I don't have nobody I know that like, CIA tried to get me. I got dudes in the Navy, Army, Marines, but I haven't heard CIA.
So a lot of times what ends up happening is CIA's requirements, because it's still a government organization. So that means you still have to have a really strict set of requirements that you meet before you can be recruited. So for a lot of folks, what that means is they have to go through the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps first. They have to go to college, right? You have to have a 4-year degree. So my guess is that what I've seen on the inside and what you haven't yet seen from the outside yet, because I'm sure you will, is that full life cycle of an individual. Somebody who starts, I don't know quite what you mean when you say in the ghetto, but I'm guessing you mean poverty and violence.
Yeah, just from poverty and the inner city. I just haven't heard of any, man, I almost got recruited to the CIA, but like you said, I haven't given that time.
Right.
It takes time to go get that degree. It takes time to be, you need years.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what it is.
And you also need to have people who get their life started without any kind of criminal record, and they continue through those really difficult years without a criminal record.
And coming from poverty without that criminal record.
Which is difficult.
Makes it a little harder, yeah. And I mean, are the benefits different in the CIA than the Army? Like, is it perks different?
Absolutely. Yeah, so you get paid more. That's an easy perk. Yeah. But then you also have, with the military, you are following orders. When you're in the CIA, you're given objectives. You carry out your objective in the best way that you see fit. right? As long as you deliver, they a lot of times don't mind how you deliver, as long as it's within certain guidelines. It's very different in the military, where in the military, it's like you're going to do exactly what you're told to do.
Yes. With China being someone who I'm always intrigued by them and stealing of our intellectual property.
Yeah.
How does the CIA view something like that?
It's a crime. Like it's a crime, and it's a massive problem, especially with CIA, with China. So every country specializes in a different type of intelligence. So we specialize in stealing secrets, specifically political and government secrets. Mossad specializes in violence. They're the Israeli intelligence service. They specialize in liberating people who are kidnapped and killing people who deserve to die, right? China specializes in the theft of intellectual property, but they're not the best. Do you know who the best is?
Nigeria?
No.
Who?
France.
Wow.
France is the best in the world at stealing intellectual property. So the number one threat to the United States for our economic secrets and our industrial secrets isn't even China. It's France.
How do you know that? I mean, I trust you, but how do we know that?
We know that because we watch our own systems. We watch our own corporations. Remember, FBI collects intelligence from inside the United States. They watch our Googles, our Salesforces, our Amazons, our massive players, right? Netflix, and they see who's trying to penetrate those systems, who's trying to steal those secrets. They find spies inside the United States. Inside the United States right now, they estimate there's 10,000 spies. 10,000 spies, undercover people living here stealing secrets.
Wow.
FBI covers all that, right?
What secrets do you get from Netflix or YouTube or like what secrets do you get? I mean, I get analytical secrets like from the back engine of, but like if you come here from say China and you're looking to tap into Netflix, like what information globally do you get from Netflix that's worth anything?
Well, it may not be global information that you're looking for. It may be information about a specific country. So let's jump into this. And I'm going to geek out on this, dude, because this is the stuff that I love, right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
If you were able to steal the back-end metrics or the back-end metadata from Netflix, and metadata is
Who, what, when, yeah.
who, what, where, when, why, how, exactly, right? Now you know who's watching what shows at what times and what places. So if you see that one particular show is popular in Nashville that isn't popular in LA, you can actually see what that show is about, and now you have a sense of what the people in Nashville care about and what the people in LA don't care about. So if you wanted to craft some sort of fake news story,
you know the hot buttons, okay.
Based on the city.
Right.
And that's a very basic example, right? You also figure out which neighborhoods have the most Netflix accounts, the most Netflix subscribers. And you can also cross-reference that against what zip codes make the most money. So if you were to find which zip codes have the most money, and then you find out that one of those wealthy zip codes also have a bunch of people on Netflix, now all of a sudden it becomes worth it to create a Trojan horse, a piece of code that can piggyback on Netflix and go into someone's laptop, someone's cell phone, someone's computer, someone's smart TV, and mine for bank data, account data.
So, but that, okay, so how does that, how do they coexist? Like, how do you get information to fish on their laptop by just working for Netflix or something like so how do they give me an example of getting the information, some information like that? Like how does someone from China come in? Do they get a position at Netflix? Do they hack into their system? Like what is the roadmap? So
there's both things can happen. So in the United States specifically, we have a very big problem where foreign workers, foreign skilled employees can get a visa to come to the United States to work for these companies because they'll take a lower paycheck than what an American will take, right? But they're actually being planted here by a foreign intelligence service. Or when they come here and they get the job, then they reach out to their own home foreign intelligence service and say, hey, guess who I work for right now? Would you like me to do something extra for an extra paycheck, right? That's called an insider threat. When you have someone who's inside your organization, who's corrupting your organization from inside, selling your secrets, embezzling money, lying to your clients, that's an insider threat.
But when we say secrets, that's what I'm trying to understand. Secrets like the metadata?
Yeah, proprietary information.
Okay.
The algorithms that Netflix uses, like think about how fast Netflix loads.
Yes.
Have you ever wondered, why does Netflix load so fast on your phone, but when you go to a blog page,
it takes all day.
Yeah. Why is that? It's because they have proprietary algorithms that they have used, that they've created to make their load time shorter and faster, because they don't want to lose you because it takes too long to get your video.
But China interested in that. I mean, of course, not that, but I'm just wondering, what can they get? I definitely like the example of zip codes and Netflix and how that, corresponds. But I'm just wondering, to come into those 10,000 people are where doing what? If you were sent into America as a spy, like, what would that look like?
I mean, it could look a number of different ways, but
give me an extreme example.
So so a very extreme example is when you're embedded into a foreign country because you are a violent threat, right? That's called a sleeper cell.
Wow.
Oftentimes it happens with terrorists, but you also find illegals. Illegal is a term that the Russians use when they insert a sleeper illegal into the United States or into a foreign country.
To do what?
To be on
soil.
To be on the soil, creating your own life, doing your own job, paying real taxes, waiting for the day that you get one order to do something extreme.
Now that's deep.
Right. That's called a sleeper. That's also called an illegal.
Wow.
Not the illegal like we hear about in the newspapers. Not an illegal alien.
Right.
But like the term that we use is that is an illegal agent.
Right.
So that is one very extreme example.
Right.
And that's an extreme scary example. There's also extremely not scary examples, right? And one of the most common examples of a not scary person who's sent to the United States is somebody who's sent here because they're like a water or electricity engineer. Like they understand soil or they understand how water purification works. And they're sent here to get their American citizenship and to get their green card. And their job is to go to, Atlanta and become part of the Atlanta water utility network. And they build a career there doing that job. And all they're supposed to do is send a report every week about how Atlanta purifies their water. And why would that person be needed? Because if China and America go to war,
they want
to poison the water.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
A report, one more thing, report just went out this week, right? And while you and I are recording this, it's May 27th, I want to say it is.
Yes.
A report just went out this week where FBI made a formal announcement to the entire American public, letting them know that we've seen an increase in Chinese agents infiltrating American utility and power networks. Why are they infiltrating? Why are they spending the money and the time to learn about how our power grid and our water works? Because if they want to, they want to be able to shut them down in a snap of fingers.
Wow.
You and I might never see that in our lifetime, but they still want to know how to do it.
This is what's crazy, and this is what I think is important to know, is that they're covering all bases, right? It's like some of this we may never use, but we send our toolbox just in case.
Now, if they're doing that to us, guess what that tells you about us?
We're doing it to them.
And if we're doing it to one country,
we're doing it to all of them. Now, with them, China specifically, because I want to ask you about it seems like China's more visible with intellectual property, even though France is more prevalent.
Right.
That's crazy.
It's because of it's what's known as the MO. You've heard of an MO in the movies and stuff?
Yes.
MO stands for modus operandi. And your modus operandi or your modus operandi is the way that you execute your operations. There are usually two types, and we classify them as bulls and snakes. Bulls like to go in and break your shit and leave their calling card and let you know, hey, that's on me. Your shit was busted up. I'm the one that busted it up. Snakes like to go in there, mess with your shit, but not break it, and then leave without you even knowing they were there.
Like U.S.
Right. Russia, the United States, France, the U.K. We're all snakes. We like to go in, do what we need to do, steal what we want to steal, and leave without you even knowing we were there. China, North Korea, Cuba, these are bulls. They like to go in there, break your shit, leave your calling card, and then when you try to make a formal accusation, they just deny it, right? In 2014, I think it was 2014, it may have been 2017, China went into the military's Office of Personal Records. The military, all of the military.
Wow.
And they had a massive scrape where they stole personal information about everybody who was in the military. a massive hack.
Wow.
And they left their code all over it. It was crystal clear that it was the Chinese. They left their calling card. But then when the ambassador to the United States went in Beijing and said this was an unacceptable violation of American privacy, they just denied it. If you ever watch a presidential debate, a fantastic presidential debate is if you go back in time and you watch when President Romney was debating President Obama. Do you remember that debate at all?
Yes, I was just watching one of those.
So it's
probably about a month ago.
Obama did this fantastic job of saying, Romney, you said this. Romney would just, in front of everybody. No, I didn't. And the debate went on like that for like an hour. Multiple points. Obama was like, you said this about middle class. You said this about the wealthy. You said this about taxes. You said this about healthcare. And Romney would just take the same talking point. I did not say those words. I didn't say those things. After the debate was over and all the fact checking came in, Obama was right. But it doesn't matter.
See, so Romney was the first fake news. Fake news.
If you look at it that way,
Trump is, because there's basically Trump do the same thing, like fake news. It's fake news. So I discredit fake news. Like I said, even with the election thing, it was just, it's crazy to see him stand on that. But still, with China, it's interesting, man, that their MO is to, fashion goods and like anything made you can get from China, and that is spooky. Knowing that's a crime, they're still able to utilize our postal service. They're still able to utilize our system. Sending things over that's illegal is wild.
So what you have here is there's a spectrum that's really important in espionage, and we call it the security and convenience spectrum. And it applies to everyday life too. If you put security on one side of the spectrum, the other side of the spectrum is convenience. The more something becomes secure, the less convenient it is. The more something becomes convenient, guess what? The less secure it is. So if the U.S. Postal Service wants to make mail convenient for Americans, it makes it a little less secure. So it can be infiltrated and abused.
Yeah.
Right? And if you want to make the borders more secure, you end up making them a lot less convenient.
Yeah.
And that's a trade-off that we always have to make. So the government is always asking itself the question, how much security do we need? How much convenience can we sacrifice?
I'm wondering, speaking of China as well, with them spying on us, or do you think they're our biggest threat? Is China our biggest threat?
It doesn't matter what I think. They are the stated #1 global threat to the United States, according to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and according to the National Intelligence Director.
With social media, with ChatGPT, let's get into like election interference and ChatGPT, TikTok coming through China. Let's start with TikTok in China. Do you think they use that to spy on us?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The same way that you would use Netflix, right? In the Netflix example that we talked about. So you've got this, so TikTok's proprietary information is all in China. That's where it was developed, that was created. They created the algorithms, they control it.
Right.
So what that means is, are they spying on like American political secrets? Probably not, because those political secrets probably don't go on TikTok.
Right.
But what they are able to do is they're able to shape everything from what kind of information gets sent to what zip code to what people are watching and what people are liking. So a fantastic oversimplified example is that within China, TikTok information, right, the content that's put on TikTok, it's cultivated in a way where it's mostly educational.
Yeah. ByteDance is doing something totally different with it over there.
But when the algorithm applies to the United States, it's totally different. It's stuff that makes us dumber, stuff that makes us angry, feeds us our own political concerns right back to us.
It's crazy how they cater the algorithm that way. And again, when I was reading something the other day, it's crazy that you said that. Again, they put all these different things in a toolbox, because I was reading that China is getting a lot of facial recognition and all of that from the app, and they don't even know how to utilize that yet.
Right.
But they know at some point we can use some American facial recognition to do something. Now, I was listening to Mike Baker. You familiar with Mike Baker?
Oh, yeah.
And he was speaking about, of course, that they're doing some looking into things, but he was saying more so he believes that China is just, TikTok is just eating the food of the market share, right? They just came in and blew Facebook out the water, almost crashed a couple of these big companies. What do you say to that? Do you?
Yeah, that's just good business, right? That's just disruptive technology.
So how do we know if it's good business or if it's them actually doing the illegal thing?
We're not supposed to know. The best illegal things are the things that you don't really know whether they're just good business or illegal, right? That's how you craft a really effective espionage operation, is that it's called the shadow of doubt. You create something that people suspect, but they use it anyways, right? It's kind of like, I think another group that does this really well is the national gun market. The U.S. gun market does a really good job of like managing this shadow of a doubt. There are some people out there who are like, there should be no guns in America, right? Guns kill people. That's all they're built to do, and that's why we should get rid of them. But then there's another group of people that's like, no, we have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, and this is the arm that I choose to bear.
Right.
There's a shadow of doubt. Both sides really do have to acknowledge that both arguments are kind of valid.
Yeah.
We do have a right to bear arms, and guns are meant for one thing.
Yes.
Right? So that's why you see such a long-term debate with no real resolution. In intelligence, you want that kind of thing. You want long-term suspicion without anyone ever landing on a final decision.
I mean, it's almost like, so what do you take, what as an American do we look at when they bring TikTok CEO to the Senate or to the floor down there and they have to talk? We think that's the big boss. We think, all right, they come, now we're going to bust you out. Now it's over, right? And this is people with no information. I totally don't think that, but I know people see them pulling TikTok up to speak in front of all these people and they feel as though this is accountability of some sort, when in my opinion, I didn't really see any.
Yeah. You're seeing what's known as a dog and pony show. They're putting pressure, public pressure on TikTok, but what people don't realize is that there's a whole schoolhouse of attorneys prepping that CEO before they ever sit in front of the Senate. And then the Senate Intelligence or the Senate committee that's holding the hearing is under American law, which means there are certain things they can't talk about according to American law, which is different than Chinese law. And which CEO are they talking to? Are they talking to the CEO of the Chinese company, the CEO of the North American company? Because you can see businesses there's a shell effect in business.
A lot.
And you shell off one business with another business name. LLCs inside LLCs inside LLCs. And there's tax benefits for doing that, but there's also legal benefits for doing that.
What are some of the ways that China infiltrates America?
One of the biggest ways that China gets into the United States is through technology. They're very adept at cyber hacking. So whether they're, a great example actually just happened last year. I think it was last year. China found a way to hack into a company, I forget their name right now, but the company was a cloud storage company that connected other companies to cloud storage. So by hacking into that storage company, what they were able to do is manipulate the code of that one company so that they could then follow the hardwire connections and the digital connections into all of their clients. And their clients that were using their service included state government clients, federal government clients, military clients, top tier Fortune 10 company clients, and they get in there and they steal intellectual property, they steal personal data, they steal credit card data, they steal anything that could compromise the company. And they're not just interested in how does the United States create the next generation of software? They're not just interested in that. They're also interested in what is the voltage that's being used to power the servers?
Wow.
What is the type of wire that's connecting the primary server to the alternate server?
Right.
They want all that information because if there's an efficiency that they can replicate for their own systems, they want it. But also they want to know how our systems work if they ever want to crash it.
Exactly.
And it's not just at a national, like a global war. It's also like if you want a Chinese car manufacturer. The Chinese have been vying to be the #1 producer of electric vehicles for a long time. Their #1 competitor, of course, is in the United States.
Right.
So the only way that China would ever actually get a chance to manufacture more electric vehicles than anybody else is either to win market share through quality of product,
Won't
which
happen.
won't happen, or create so much operational challenge for another.
Slow it down. Yes.
Slow
Makes
it
sense.
down, muck it up, make them lose money trying to fix a problem that they don't even know exists.
Exactly.
And that's industrial espionage.
Wow. That is so crazy. When we hear something like Putin has cancer, how does CIA get some information like that if we even heard it from CIA?
Yeah, CIA didn't get you that information.
Okay,
when
we hear something like that, what is that about?
The problem with the world that we live in right now is that we live in a world that's very much focused on sensational information, right? We've become so accustomed in the information era, we've become so accustomed to getting any information we want when we want it that we have stopped vetting the information itself.
Wow.
So the idea that Putin had cancer, this is a great example. I was just talking about it with a client the other day. I think that was like April or May after they invaded last year, a year ago.
And they just start saying,
oh, Putin's got cancer. And he's got like health issues or whatever else. And then what ends up happening is you never hear about it again, and it doesn't prove to be true. So somewhere, somebody, it could have been a blogger, it could have been a
so you take it not to be true.
You can't. First of all, when you heard the information, you only heard it from one stream. It was in the news primarily, right? Like the.
But then
they
point to like certain ways he does certain things. Like it's certain little things they point to,
right?
And it's like, I don't know.
So you treat it like a data point, right?
Right.
You treat it like a data
one.
point.
Yeah.
But do you get more? Like what?
Exactly.
Do we get more data later that makes us really think that it's true?
And I think some more stuff has came out now. I think that one time they said, but again, it's what is it authentic that when it's coming out? But what is authentic nowadays? Again, because nobody vets information. So when something comes out, do we know? Do we don't know? So you take that not to be the case. You don't think Putin has cancer?
Correct. I think that Vladimir Putin, based on the Vladimir Putin that I've been watching for the last year and a half, longer really, that Vladimir Putin is full of energy. He may have cancer, but if he does, he's under some kind of very effective treatment because the dude still seems to be active. He still seems to be strong. He still seems to be in control of Russia. He's still waging a war against Ukraine. Like, he hasn't changed much from what I've seen from the guy the day before he invaded Ukraine.
Okay. Let's get to your thoughts on Ukraine and Russia's war.
Yeah.
Can you give my audience a synopsis of what's going on over there?
Yeah, so in February 24th of 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. And that invasion has been called unlawful, it's been called illegal, it's been called an attack on democracy. There's a lot of political narrative around the invasion, but basically starting on the day that they were invaded, Ukraine started getting a lot of support from the West, from the United States and from NATO, sending them weapons, sending them equipment, sending them medical goods, sending them anything they need to carry out their defense against the Russian invasion. And what's played out over the last 16 or so months is that Ukraine, this small, poor country with no significant support from outside other than weapons and material, has been fighting back and defeating this invasion, this Russian invasion. When everybody was so afraid that Russia was this powerful country, now it's starting to look like Russia's not such a powerful country. Now, we went into a ceasefire period, not a ceasefire, but we went into a period of reduced aggression in about November of last year. And since then, people have been waiting for a counteroffensive, another counteroffensive from Ukraine, and or another counteroffensive from Russia to try to see where the war goes next. And that brings us to where we are today. People are waiting to see if this counteroffensive is going to happen. NATO and European and Western allies continue to send new weapons and new support to Ukraine to fight back against the Russians. And Russia continues to increase its defensive positions across eastern Ukraine, where it's taken over approximately 17% of the Ukraine territory.
So what's the motivation behind the war?
This is what is so frustrating to me, is that in media, people aren't talking about the real motivation. They're calling it an attack on democracy. Like Russia just decided one day to attack Ukraine because they were a democracy. That's not the case at all. In reality, Russia as a country does not have the capability, it doesn't have the resources on its own to be able to maintain a lifestyle or a healthy lifestyle for its own people by itself. Russia has always been part of what was known as a union of states. The most famous union was the Soviet Union.
Right.
So Russia created this reliance where it had to rely on the other Soviet satellites so that it could feed and tax its own people. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, Russia lost its satellite states. Now, at the time, they were all so mingled together, they all needed each other to survive. But then since 91, NATO and the West have started creating new alliances with the former Soviet states. So now there are former Soviet states that are actually part of NATO. So in that process, what happened is Russia lost access to the resources that it needed to protect its own national security. One of the key, most important resources that it has is the flow of natural gas and the flow of oil.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Into Europe. And
Yes.
guess where all of that oil and gas flows through?
Russia.
Ukraine.
Ukraine. Okay.
It all flows through eastern Ukraine.
Okay.
So if Russia loses Ukraine, if Ukraine becomes pro-Western, if Ukraine becomes part of NATO, if Ukraine becomes a country
That's okay.
then it can essentially cut Russia off
Yes.
from being able to sell its fuel and oil
Yes.
anywhere.
And that's what I was going to ask you about the energy dependence and all of that, because I knew that it was some underlining happening
Yep.
with that. That's so crazy.
It's not an attack on democracy. Ukraine was never a democracy, right? Amnesty International and multiple think tanks around the world have looked at Ukraine and looked at Ukraine going back to 2001 and before. And it has always been a struggling or transitional democracy. And it struggles because it's heavily corrupt. It's based off of an archaic Soviet system, right? It is not a fair and open place with human rights. It's not a democracy. I think it scored a 6 out of 10, possibly less, in terms of Amnesty International's ratings for a first world country or for a fair and equal democracy. One of the first things Ukraine did after they were invaded is they conscripted all men to mandatory service in the military. That is a human rights violation.
Right.
Right? You cannot restrict the freedom
Right.
of movement based on gender.
Right.
And that's exactly what they did. So
Right.
it's really tricky because most of the society is only told what benefits the narrative, because newspapers want people to read the news, and they want people to be angry, and they want people to be offended, and they want people to come back the next day and buy the newspaper again, or click on the ad, or click on the website, right? They want that. So they have to tell a story from a certain direction that triggers your emotions. That's us dealing with propaganda all over again.
Yeah. And that's, to me, I look at propaganda and I see, well, even when I think about China and COVID, I say, man, we dealt with a lot of propaganda,
Yep.
even in that facet. How did the CIA, or how would someone in that position, how did you view COVID? Was that an attack, or was that?
So my assessment of COVID is that COVID was a legitimate mutation of a virus that was novel, right? It wasn't engineered. It wasn't created
You
intentionally.
do not believe it was engineered?
I do not believe it was
The
engineered.
Wuhan lab?
I believe that there was a lab.
Right.
I believe that people were looking at chemical and biological warfare. I do not believe that somebody successfully, on paper, created COVID and then replicated that plan in a test tube and then released it on its own population. I don't believe that happened. What I do believe is that maybe they were trying to create a super virus, and then somebody dropped the test tube and some bat got infected, and then that bat carried it to a rat, et cetera, and some lesser version.
I think
of it
we can
came out.
live here a little while, because this is a good one. So you do not believe? Help me. I mean, there's a lot being said about, again, this being engineered.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great minds that believe this may have been engineered, and you're saying, give me some reasons why you do not believe that.
So there's a difference. First of all, I think a lot of the narrative
Engineered and released
intentionally.
intentionally, yes.
Right.
Because it was engineered could have been engineered because we do engineer these things.
Right. So there's a couple of things, right? So first of all, I feel like a lot of the narrative that people are hearing, even from the great minds talking about an engineered virus, there's a lot of the narrative that's leaving out the details of what they're saying. So what a lot of big minds are saying is that that people have been engineering the coronavirus, right? The coronavirus is a type of cell, a type of viral cell that can attach itself and spread easily. There's lots of reasons that you would engineer a virus like that and work to use it to create something. You could use a virus like that to cure cancer. You could use a virus like that to cure disease because it spreads and it attaches very easily. So there's lots of reasons why people would be investigating how do we use this coronavirus to do something positive. And that means there's also reasons that you would look at creating weapons out of it too.
What's going on? It's your boy Big Loon. Right now, if you looked at this clip and you enjoyed it, hit subscribe. Watch the next video. We on the road to 100K subscribers on YouTube. If you're a fan, come to Patreon. We got exclusive videos there, and also the show with just me alone. Salute to the supporters. Verify your customers and know who's your viewers. It's Up There Podcast. Let's get it.
Yo, what up? This Big Loon. This is It's Up There Podcast.